So we are following King Ashwapati in his descent into all the lower levels of consciousness. And last week, I think we started reading Book 2, Canto 8, The World of Falsehood, the Mother of Evil, and the Sons of Darkness. We read the first section up to the break on page 222. And now Sri Aurobindo is beginning to tell us how such a world could come into existence. How could it happen? When nothing was, save matter without soul, and a spiritless hollow was the heart of time. Then life first touched the insensible abyss, awaking the stark void to hope and grief. Her pallid beam smote the unfathomed night in which God hid himself from his own view. In all things, she sought their slumbering mystic truth, the unspoken word that inspires unconscious forms. She groped in his deeps for an invisible law, fumbled in the dim subconscient for his mind, and strove to find a way for spirit to be. But from the night another answer came. A seed was in that nether matrix cast, a dumb, unprobed husk of perverted truth, a cell of an insentient infinite, a monstrous birth prepared its cosmic form. In nature's Titan embryo, ignorance. Then, in a fatal and stupendous hour, something that sprang from the stark inconscient sleep, unwillingly begotten by the mute void, lifted its ominous head against the stars, overshadowing earth with its huge body of doom. It chilled the heavens with the menace of a face. A nameless power, a shadowy will arose, immense and alien to our universe. In the inconceivable purpose none can gauge, a vast non-being robed itself with shape. The boundless nescience of the unconscious depths covered eternity with nothingness. A seeking mind replaced the seeing soul. Life grew into a huge and hungry death. The spirit's bliss was changed to cosmic pain. Assuring God's self-cowled neutrality, a mighty opposition conquered space. A sovereign ruling falsehood, death and grief. It pressed its fierce hegemony on the earth, disharmonizing the original style of the architecture of her fate's design. It falsified the primal cosmic will, and bound to struggle and dread vicissitudes, the long, slow process of the patient power. Implanting error in the stuff of things, it made an ignorance of the all-wise law. It baffled the sure touch of life's hid sense, kept dumb the intuitive guide in matter's sleep, deformed the insect's instinct and the brute's, disfigured man's thought-born humanity. A shadow fell across the simple ray. Obscured was the truth light in the cavern heart that burns unwitnessed in the altar crypt behind the still velamen's secrecy, companioning the Godhead of the shrine. Thus was the dire antagonist energy born, who mimes the eternal mother's mighty shape and mocks her luminous infinity with a grey, distorted silhouette in the night. Arresting the passion of the climbing soul, she forced on life a slow and faltering pace. Her hands deflecting and retarding weight is laid on the mystic evolution's curve. The tortuous line of her deceiving mind, the gods see not, and man is impotent. Oppressing the God spark within the soul. She forces back to the beast the human fall. Yet, in her formidable, instinctive mind, she feels the One grow in the heart of time and sees the immortal shine through the human mold. Alarmed for her rule and full of fear and rage, she prowls around each light that gleams through the dark, casting its ray from the spirit's lonely tent, hoping to enter with fierce, stealthy tread, and in the cradle slay the divine child. Incalculable are her strength and ruse. Her touch is a fascination and a death. She kills her victim with his own delight. Even good she makes a hook to drag to hell. For her, the world runs to its agony. Will you read, Dana?
When nothing was saved, matter without soul, and the spiritless hollow was the heart of time. Then light first touched the insensible abyss, awaking the stark voice to hope and grief. Her pallid beam smote the unfathomed night, in which God hid himself from his own view. In all things, she sought their slumbering mystic truth, the unspoken word that inspires unconscious forms. She groped in his deeps for an invisible law, fumbled in the dim subconscious of his mind, and strove to find a way for spirit to be.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo is telling us about a time when there was only matter. Matter without soul. The heart of time was as if empty, a spiritless, hollow and empty space. Then life first touched the insensible abyss. We have read something about this at the end of Book 2, Canto 3, about the descent of life, how life descended into matter, and the first living beings arose. So he's going back to a time before that when there was nothing except matter, without any soul. A spiritless hollow was the heart of time. Then the power of life first touched the deep, dark places of the universe, where there was nothing living, so there was no feeling, no consciousness. The insensible abyss, the depths which could not feel anything. But that touch of the life force woke something up. The stark void, this huge, dark emptiness. The touch of life woke up that emptiness to hope and grief. The pale beam of consciousness, of life, was as if a blow into that darkness of that bottomless night in which God had hidden himself from his own view. If we can think at the very beginning of things, the divine presence was hidden in complete darkness. But this life power is seeking. She's seeking in all things, in everything that exists. She's looking for their truth. There must be a truth sleeping within all things, a mystic truth. She's looking for that word of creation and blessing, the unspoken word that inspires unconscious forms to wake up to life. In God's deeps, in the deep, dark folds of things, life is groping, she's feeling around for an invisible law. She's fumbling, that's like groping in the dark when you can't see, you try to feel what is there. Life was fumbling in that state of dim subconscious before the full waking up of consciousness. She wants to find God's mind, what he's thinking, what is his intention. And she's struggling to find a way for spirit to be, to find a way of existing in that darkness.
Shraddhavan, what he means pallid?
Pallid, very pale.
Oh, okay. Fumble?
To fumble. It's when you can't feel properly, you can't see, and you're just feeling around and you don't know what you're feeling. Fumbling. If you have very skillful hands, you will never fumble. They will always know what to do. But if your hands are unconscious and clumsy, then you will find yourself fumbling for things. So, life wants things to wake up to consciousness in order to be able to express the possibilities of the spirit. Kamla, would you read?
But from the night another answer came. A seed was in that nether matrix cast, a dumb, unprobed husk of perverted truth, a cell of an insentient infinite, a monster's breath prepared its cosmic form. In nature's titan, embryo ignorance, then in a fatal and stubbornness of something that sprang from the star inconscient sleep, unwillingly begotten by the mute void, lifted its ominous head against the stars, overshadowing earth with its huge body of doom. It chilled the heavens with the menace of a face.
This is terrible. It's really scary. Life wants to wake up consciousness, the possibility of forms that spirit can use to express itself. But from that darkness, that unconsciousness, even that night where God had hidden himself from his own view, another response comes. It's as if a seed was planted, was cast into that nether matrix. Nether means below. A matrix is, it can be a womb, it's what gives birth. A seed was cast. And that seed was itself somehow spoiled. It was dumb, it had no way of expressing itself. It was just a husk, like a hard outside of a seed, which can't grow properly. It's a husk of perverted truth, a truth that is already distorted. There's something wrong with that seed that is cast into the heart of things. He says it's a cell, just a single cell of an insentient infinite, an infinity without sensitivity. So that seed does start to sprout from that cell, that husk. A monstrous birth. It's not a proper, correct birth of something with a proper form. It's something distorted and spoiled, terrible, a monstrous birth, prepared its cosmic form to infect the whole universe. It uses nature's titan embryo. An embryo is also a small life form which is growing, but this is a very powerful embryo of nature. It's the power of ignorance.
Shraddhavan?
Yes.
May I ask something?
Yes, please, John.
About line 91.
Yes.
Why is there the word another? Another answer.
Well, what was being attempted, what life was attempting to do, was to find a way for spirit to manifest. And just the opposite happens. From the night, from the darkness, there's this birth out of ignorance and insentient. This monstrous birth comes. It's not at all what was intended. Something has gone wrong. So, fatal means there's something dreadful happening, no? Even deathly. This hour is tremendously significant. It's stupendous, but it's stupendous in a very dark and bad way. Something is born, something that sprang from the sleep of the stark inconscient, where there's no consciousness. This something has happened by accident, unwillingly begotten by the silent emptiness. The darkness and the emptiness has given birth to this something monstrous. And this head lifts its ominous head against the stars. It's as if we can see it, no? there's this monstrous head suddenly blotting out the stars, dominating the universe, overshadowing the whole earth with this huge body of doom, of disaster. It's a really scary picture. And there's this huge face overshadowing the earth, this huge body, and it chills the heavens. It's as if it blots out all warmth and light with the menace, the threat of a face. So who will read next? Where are we now? You will read, yes.
A nameless power, a shadow will arise. Hymnus and alien to our universe. In the inconceivable purpose none can
Gauge.
A vast non-being robing itself with shape. The boundless
nescience, it means not knowing, nescience
of the unconscious depth, covering eternity with nothingness. A seeking mind replaced the seeing soul. Life drove into a huge and hungry day. The spring's bliss was changed to cosmic pain.
Thank you. So that's the result of this monstrous birth. Something dreadful, fatal and threatening has come into existence in the universe. A nameless power, a shadowy will arose. And it's immense, it's huge, gigantic, limitless. And it is something that is alien to our universe. It doesn't belong here. Sri Aurobindo says there's an inconceivable purpose that none of us can measure or understand. We can't guess what is the intention. In the inconceivable purpose, nobody can gauge, nobody can measure it or weigh it or understand it. A vast non-being robed itself with shape. It's something that doesn't really exist or shouldn't exist. It's the opposite of existence. The boundless nescience. Nescience means not knowing. It's even stronger than ignorance. In ignorance there's some knowing, partial knowing. This is nescience, not knowing of the unconscious depths of things. Covered eternity with nothingness. This vast non-being, Asat, robed itself with shape. And so things get distorted. The creation doesn't work out the way it is intended or should have done. A seeking mind replaced the seeing soul with its direct knowledge. Life gets transformed into its opposite. Life grew into a huge and hungry death, consuming everything that exists. The bliss, the native bliss of the spirit, gets changed, transformed to universal pain. You'll read Prema.
Asserting God's self-covenant neutrality, a mighty opposition conquered space, a sovereign ruling falsehood, death and grief. It pressed its
Fierce hegemony
on the earth,
disharmonizing
the original style of the architecture of her fate's design. It
falsified
the freeman cosmic will and bound to struggle and dread
vicissitudes.
The long, slow process of the
patient power. Yes. A mighty opposition conquered space, something that's in contradiction with the original intention. This mighty opposition even makes sure that God won't do anything about it. He will keep neutral. He won't interfere in this process. Assuring God's self-cult that he will cover his head and he will not look, he will not interfere, whatever happens. This mighty opposition conquers space. And this mighty opposition it's very powerful, it is ruling, its characteristics are falsehood, death, and grief. And it's imposing, it's pressing its fierce rule, its hegemony on the earth. It's disharmonizing, it's upsetting the harmony of the original style of the architecture of the universe, the design of life. It falsified the original universal will, and it binds, it imposes struggle and dread vicissitudes, all kinds of disasters and unexpected things that happen. It bound to struggle and dread vicissitudes, the long, slow process of the patient power, the creative power which is trying to bring about life in unconscious matter, trying to make possible the manifestation of spirit in the forms of the universe. This interference is making everything so difficult. I don't know who's next. Joel, is it you?
Implanting error in the stuff of things, it made an ignorance of the all-wise law. It baffled the sure touch of light's hid sense, kept dumb the intuitive guide in matter's sleep, deformed the insect's instinct and roots, disfigured men's thought-born humanity. A shadow fell across the simple ray. Obscured was the truth light in the cavern heart that burns unwitnessed in the altar crypt, behind the still velament's secrecy, companioning the Godhead of the shrine.
Thank you. So this mighty opposition implants error, mistakes, things going wrong into the very stuff of things, the substance, the universal substance. It distorts things. It made an ignorance of the all-wise law. Life in itself has a sure touch about what it is supposed to do. But this opposition baffles life, prevents her from doing what she knows is right or feels is right. It baffled the sure touch of life's hid sense, its secret meaning and significance. This opposition keeps dumb. It doesn't allow to speak. The intuitive guide in matter's sleep. In matter itself, there is an intuitive guide which has managed everything so perfectly, but now has interfered this opposition, this mighty opposition. So this causes a deformation. Things get misshapen, misformed. Even the instinct of the insects and the animals, and distorting, disfiguring human beings, our humanity, our way of thinking, it gets distorted. So in this way, a shadow fell across the simple ray of spontaneous truth. There's the truth light in the deep heart, but that gets overshadowed, obscured. That truth light, which is burning secretly, unwitnessed, in that secret, sacred place beneath the altar. Behind there's a curtain keeping secret things, sacred things, behind the still velamen secrecy. This is the truth light, which is the companion of the divine being in the inmost heart. That gets hidden, veiled, suppressed, distorted. Ganga Lakshmi.
Zeus was a dire antagonist energy born, who mimes the eternal mother mighty shape, and mocks her luminous infinity with a grey distorted silhouette in the night, arresting the passion of the climbing soul. She forced on life the slow and faltering peace. His hands deflecting and retarding weight is laid on the mystic evolution's curve, the tortuous line of a distilling light. The gods see not, and man is impotent, oppressing the God's spark within the soul. She falls back to the beast is a human
Fall.
fall.
Yes. So in this way, through this opposition and this shadow, a dire, a terrible antagonist energy was born, a power. Perhaps it's this power that we read about, this mother of evil.
One second, on the line 100%.
Yes.
Vellamen's secrecy.
Velamen. A velamen is a kind of curtain which veils the secret, sacred things from the general public. Velamen. He uses the word several times in the poem. So perhaps it comes from the Bible, the idea that the really sacred things, not everybody can look at them. They have to be veiled. Only the priest can go behind the veil and see them. So there's a truth light. If we look again at that sentence, there's a truth light which is burning in the cavern heart, in the deep heart of things, but it's not seen, it's unwitnessed. It's burning in this crypt, in this also secret, sacred place beneath the altar where we make the offering. And it's behind this, the secrecy of this curtain. But that truth light is the companion of the Godhead, of the divine being who inhabits the shrine, who lives in the deep heart. But because that presence, that sacred presence is hidden and distorted, then this dire, this terrible, hostile energy, an antagonist energy, which is opposed to the divine purpose. That energy mimes, copies, apes the eternal mother's mighty shape. She tries to look like the mother and take the mother's place. That's what we read, this description of the mother of falsehood. She somehow looks like Durga in some ways. That dire antagonist energy is mocking the luminous infinity of the eternal mother. Instead, she projects this grey, distorted silhouette, this outline in the night. And what she does is she holds back the passion of the climbing soul. And life wants to grow, to evolve, but this presence forces on life a slow and faltering pace. Faltering is when you can't, your feet don't obey you, you don't know where to put your feet. You have to hesitate and stumble. So life, instead of just growing and blossoming, this opposition is forcing on life this slow and faltering pace. And this presence is pressing down on the curve of evolution. If we think of this great spiral, upward spiral, she's pressing down on it. Her hands deflecting, that's making it go crooked, somewhere where it shouldn't go, and retarding. She's holding it back, making evolution happen much more slowly than intended. This tortuous line, this distorted line of her deceiving mind, the gods don't see it. And man, we do somehow perceive that things are not as they should be, but we can't do anything about it. Man is impotent. That power forces back to the beast the human fall. She makes us, she pushes us back to our animal origins. Leila, would you read?
Yet, in her formidable, instinctive mind, she feels the one grow in the heart of time, and sees the immortal shine through the human mold. Alarmed for a room and full of fear and rage, she prowls around each light that gleams through the dark, casting its ray from the spirit's lonely tent, hoping to enter with fierce, stealthy tread, and in the cradle slay the divine child.
Thank you. So that power, she has a very powerful, instinctive mind, and she feels the one divine growing in the heart of time. She may try to deflect that divine work, but she can't do it fully. She feels the one grow in the heart of time. She sees the light of immortality shine through the human mold, that growing immortality within the human being. But she wants to preserve her own rule. She's alarmed for her rule. So she's full of fear and rage as she feels the divine spark growing. So the image he gives, she's prowling around each light that gleams through the dark, casting its ray from the spirit's lonely tent. As if the spirit is a warrior in an army camping in the night, and if some gleam of light shines out, that alarms her. Where is that light coming from? She wants to destroy that light. She's hoping to enter that tent, the spirit's lonely tent, with her fierce and stealthy tread, secretly creeping in. She wants to destroy, to kill the divine child in its cradle before it becomes strong. Oak, will you read? Will you read?
In cat-lover are her strength and rules. Her touch is a fascination and a death. She kills her victim with his own delight. Even God, she makes a hook to drag to hell. For her, the water runs to its agony. Often the pilgrim on the eternal road, ill-lit from clouds by the pale moon of a mind, or in devious byways wandering alone, or lost in desert where no path is seen. Falls overpowered by her lion leap, a conquered captive under her dreadful force, intoxicated by a burning breath, and amorous groan of a destroying mouth. Once a companion of the scared fire, the mortal perishes to God and light. An adversary governs heart and brain, a nature hostile to the mother force.
Thank you. She's so strong, incalculable are her strength and her ruse, her clever trickery, the tricks that she uses. Her touch is a fascination and a death. It's somehow fascinating, but it destroys. She kills her victim with his own delight. Even good she makes a hook to drag to hell. She persuades her victims to be virtuous, but in a way that makes them her victims. For her, for this mother of falsehood, this mother of evil, for her, the world runs to its agony. And then, most terrifyingly, he describes what happens to the unwary pilgrim. Often, the pilgrim on the Eternal's road, the one who is aspiring for and trying to reach the truth. On his road, if it is ill-lit from clouds by the pale moon of mind, it may happen to us that on our way, even if we are aspiring to the divine, the mind is clouded, the moonlight which passes through the clouds is not very bright. We can't see where we are going properly. And we may find ourselves in devious byways, not on the straight high road, but off on some path somewhere. We don't even know where it's going. There we find ourselves wandering alone without companions. Or we get lost in desert places where we can't see any path at all. The poor pilgrim falls, overpowered by her lion leap. She just jumps on him like a predator. He becomes a conquered captive under her dreadful paws. And then he even is attracted by that. He's intoxicated by that burning breath. He grows amorous. He feels attracted by that destroying mouth. In one of her talks, Mother has spoken about this, that people who've been attacked by wild animals, and if they've escaped, they report that, oh yes, I wanted to be eaten by that snake or that tiger or whatever it was. There was an attraction. So that pilgrim who was once a companion of the sacred fire that mortal being perishes. He's lost to God and light. An adversary, a hostile power governs, takes over the control of his heart and his brain. This nature which is hostile to the mother force, the mother force of truth. We'll stop there for today. When nothing was save matter without soul, and a spiritless hollow was the heart of time, then life first touched the insensible abyss, awaking the stark void to hope and grief. Her pallid beam smote the unfathomed night in which God hid himself from his own view. In all things she sought their slumbering mystic truth, the unspoken word that inspires unconscious forms. She groped in his deeps for an invisible law, fumbled in the dim subconscient for his mind, and strove to find a way for spirit to be. But from the night another answer came. A seed was in that nether matrix cast, a dumb, unprobed husk of perverted truth, a cell of an insentient infinite. A monstrous birth prepared its cosmic form in nature's Titan embryo ignorance. Then, in a fatal and stupendous hour, something that sprang from the stark inconscient sleep, unwillingly begotten by the mute void, lifted its ominous head against the stars, overshadowing earth with its huge body of doom. It chilled the heavens with the menace of a face. A nameless power, a shadowy will arose, immense and alien to our universe. In the inconceivable purpose none can gauge, a vast non-being robed itself with shape. The boundless nescience of the unconscious depths covered eternity with nothingness. A seeking mind replaced the seeing soul. Life grew into a huge and hungry death. The spirit's bliss was changed to cosmic pain. Assuring God's self-cowled neutrality, a mighty opposition conquered space. A sovereign ruling falsehood, death and grief, it pressed its fierce hegemony on the earth, disharmonizing the original style of the architecture of her fate's design. It falsified the primal cosmic will, and bound to struggle and dread vicissitudes, the long, slow process of the patient power. Implanting error in the stuff of things, it made an ignorance of the all-wise law. It baffled the sure touch of life's hid sense, kept dumb the intuitive guide in matter's sleep, deformed the insect's instinct and the brute's, disfigured man's thought-born humanity. A shadow fell across the simple ray. Obscured was the truth light in the cavern heart that burns unwitnessed in the altar crypt behind the still velamen's secrecy, companioning the Godhead of the shrine. Thus was the dire antagonist energy born, who mimes the eternal mother's mighty shape, and mocks her luminous infinity with a grey, distorted silhouette in the night. Arresting the passion of the climbing soul, she forced on life a slow and faltering pace. Her hands deflecting and retarding weight is laid on the mystic evolution's curve. The tortuous line of her deceiving mind the gods see not, and man is impotent. Oppressing the God's spark within the soul, she forces back to the beast the human fall. Yet, in her formidable, instinctive mind, she feels the One grow in the heart of time, and sees the immortal shine through the human mould. Alarmed for her rule and full of fear and rage, she prowls around each light that gleams through the dark, casting its ray from the spirit's lonely tent, hoping to enter with fierce, stealthy tread, and in the cradle slay the divine child. Incalculable are her strength and ruse. Her touch is a fascination and a death. She kills her victim with his own delight. Even good she makes a hook to drag to hell. For her the world runs to its agony. Often the pilgrim on the Eternal's road, ill-lit from clouds by the pale moon of mind, or in devious byways wandering alone, or lost in deserts where no path is seen, falls overpowered by her lion leap, a conquered captive under her dreadful paws. Intoxicated by a burning breath and amorous groan of a destroying mouth, once a companion of the sacred fire, the mortal perishes to God and light. An adversary governs heart and brain, a nature hostile to the mother force.